Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas. We're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in western North Carolina mountains, USA. We're here today with Adrienne Dewey. I think did you have a few announcements, Adrienne?
Yes, I sure do.
Okay.
So we have our social media up and running. So you guys can find everything that you need at michaelmamas.net or michaelmamas.com. There's archived audios and podcasts that are available there. And
at michaelmamas.com, the audio podcasts are archived. So any podcast we've ever done, you can listen to them by going to michaelmamas.com.
Yeah. And when you go to YouTube and type in Michael Mamas, at the very top, there will be the YouTube link. But it takes about 24 hours for them to download up there. Is that right?
Yeah. We're live streaming right now on Facebook and Twitter. But on YouTube, it'll be 24 hours before it shows up. But the good thing about YouTube is if you go to YouTube, type in my name, then you'll get a list of a bunch of older videos, things that have been up 24 hours or longer. And also at the very top is my YouTube channel. And if you click on that, the first two that appear are how to meditate, instructions how to meditate. So that's good to know about.
Yeah, I really love that that's so available right there at the top.
Oh, good. And then at the bottom of michaelmamas.com, first we list all the different podcasts. You can look through them. There's a little, whatever it is, on the right-hand side of the listing of each podcast. After you click on it, it gives a little description of it. But then at the bottom is all the different websites that are listed. If you want to visit Sri Someshwara Temple, or if you want to make a donation, you do that to the Sri Someshwara Temple. You can find that link down there. Also, if you have any questions or comments or would like to sign up for subscriptions, all that amounts to, I think, is when we post a podcast or a blog, we just send out a little email announcing it. And you can do that by going to michaelmamas.net, which is also listed at the bottom of michaelmamas.com. And once you're there, there's what is it called? I forget. There's a thing at the top, and then there's little 3 parallel lines on the right. If you click on that, you can ask a question, type in a question or a comment to the blogs, or you can also subscribe so that you get an announcement each time a new podcast come up. But right now, if you're on Facebook, you should be, and we're live at 10:30 every Sunday. And for that hour, if you, there's a way of typing a comment. Scotty, do you know how to do that? There's a way that you can actually type in a comment or a question while you're on Facebook, and then we'll see it, and then we can respond to it. We may do that at the end of the podcast if Adrienne and Scott remember to remind me, because I might forget. Is that easy to do, Scotty? Or you need
I'm looking at the page right now, and just below your video, there's a comment box.
I see.
So if anybody wants to comment while we're on, I can even look at some of the questions, and if it's appropriate,
Oh, good. So you can see them too, huh, Scotty?
I can see it live. So
oh, good.
If we want to get anything that anybody needs answered.
All right. Yeah, because last time after the podcast, I noticed that there were comments, and I didn't even notice while I was on the podcast. We'll get it down. Here's one right now. Good. Heard from Linda. Good morning. Appreciate that, Linda. Now we know it's working. Okay, so anything else, Adrienne, that you wanted to announce, or did that pretty much cover it?
That covers it.
Okay.
You hit it all.
Good. So today's podcast is about Mount Soma, and it's called the 2020 Election, Ancient Technology, and the Razor's Edge. This is really just the gist, the essence of really what we're all about. And that is that It was back in the early 80s, probably 1981 or something, when I heard about there's this technology in Vedic literature of how to build an enlightened city. And the more I heard about it, the more I was intrigued. And the idea is that if you build one enlightened city on each continent would be sufficient to radiate enough coherence to take care of that entire continent. Now, I can imagine, I mean, to anybody who's not familiar with Vedic technology or any of this, it sounds pretty far-fetched, you know? But I think it's important to realize Albert Einstein was into Vedic science. He even learned Sanskrit. He'd meet with Vedic scholars and talk with them. Oppenheimer, you know, the guy who developed, he was in charge of the whole Manhattan Project. He was into it. Schrodinger, Tesla, all those guys, they realized that Vedic science was the cutting edge of the future of modern science. And it's really a funny thing, you know, because those technologies were there. And if you read a lot of the literature, history books we're talking about, that they go back thousands of years, and it just becomes like, it can't possibly be right, can it? At the same time, we know about like the pyramids. How did they build them? We don't know how they built them. There's actually a guy, he built the Coral Castle. I think he built it in the 1920s or something like that. It's in South Florida. And he was just this little guy, you know, and there are these big boulders of rocks, tons. And he would have, one of them was like a revolving door. It was one big, huge rock, and it was resting on one little point. And to this day, you can go down there and just push on that rock and it spins around that one little point. How did he do that? All sorts of big boulders way up high and on top of walls and things that this one guy built. And he did it at night, so nobody could see how he did it. Interesting that he said he learned the technology of how they built the ancient pyramids. And there are all sorts of things like that in different parts. In South America, I forget where it is, Peru, I think, I don't know. There's this big, massive structure with these multiple ton blocks that are all fit together. You can't even fit a piece of paper between them. And those blocks don't exist on top of that mountain. They're 100 miles away, or I don't know. How did they do it, you know? And I you know, I get a kick out of it. It's like, instead of believing that in ancient times we had a technology, even though that's all described in the Vedic literature, but instead of believing that, somehow it seems easier for people to believe that people came here from outer space and built those things and left. The technology is there, and it's a very precise science. It's a very precise technology. It's in the Vedic literature. And so when I heard about this thing in the early 80s, that it can be built, I mean, to me, it was like, why don't we build it, you know? And that was always in my mind, but it wasn't until 2002, November 2002, when we finally bought this land and started to build it. It's not done. It's far from done, but it is a work in progress, and we have a strong foothold, and we have a strong enough foothold that proves that the technology actually works. And I have to say, I mean, I thought about writing a book about everything that's happened and how incredible it's been, you know. It would read like a fiction, you know, it would read like sci-fi, you know. But we've experienced enough here where we're convinced that that technology is valid, it works. And so we're dedicated here at Mount Soma to building it, but it's a very precise science. You see, Vedic literature, it's both the heart and the mind. So there's devotion to God and all of that, but it's integrated with rationality, with science. And, it's fine. We can worship God, how we feel inclined, and it's beautiful. Like they say, no drop of love is ever wasted. But there's also a technology involved. Just like if you have a guest over at your house, there's the technology of opening the front door, turning the lights on, giving them a place to sit, cooking a meal, all that. There's technology involved in all that. So there's a technology in the Vedic literature that describes precisely how to interface with the deepest levels of existence, and that one thing that's the source of everything that commonly people call God. We could call it the unified field. There was a commercial I've seen come on television a few times, and it's some preacher, I don't know, and he says, with all the horrible things going on in the world today, all the conflict and, suffering and all that, one thing is clear, that the only solution is God, And I hear that, and depending on what is meant by God, I'd have to say, what I mean by that, the guy is right. There is, and it's in the literature, there is a technology, and we're building it at Mount Soma. And what that technology is, it's something that takes that source of infinite harmony, infinite intelligence, infinite coherence, that one thing that's the source of everything, and it enlivens that value so it permeates all levels of life. All levels of life, It's like watering the root of the tree. The whole tree flourishes. But we've kind of lost track of that, haven't we? It's a little bit like we're so focused on the surface that we're looking for that surface solution that's going to solve everything. And I'm not saying you don't do that. We have to pay attention to the surface of life and attend to it. But really, what makes our attention most effective is how well our activities on the surface are connected to the depth. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. And there's a technology involved in it. Now, you look at the election and all the stuff that's going on with the Democrats and the Republicans and Trump and Biden, and now there's these, ideas about election and blah, 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 and this and that. And again, people's attention tends to be on the surface value. This guy's good and that guy's bad, and we cling on to that. And not only in politics, not only with respect to the 2020 election, but in life. I mean, everybody's got an opinion. And if you agree with them, then fine. If you don't agree with them, there's conflict, But again, that's surface. That's all surface value. And again, I want to emphasize, it's not that we don't pay attention to surface value, but we have to realize that it's our connection to the depth that's going to sort all of that out. Trying to resolve things on the surface of life without a strong connection to the depth is a little bit like, chasing your tail around in a circle. It's not going to work. Now, here's another thing I was thinking. It's interesting. We had this ancient technology in ancient times, and everything was flourishing, and you could read about these, great enlightened cities and that in ancient times. So the question comes up, well, then why would that go away? Why would they stop? And there are many reasons for that. But one reason, one reason is that everything is good. Everything is fine. It's going on generation after generation. They've got it figured out. The surface is fine. Just enjoy the surface. And so what happens is then the depth, the source of the whole thing, tends to be forgotten over time. And there are other factors like migrations and, natural disasters, and you could go on and on about things like that. But nevertheless, the point is that the knowledge is there. It's in the Vedic literature, and it gets forgotten, it gets ignored, or it gets distorted. I use the analogy like if you have an automobile, you got this great automobile, and it's so beautiful, and you lift up the hood and you look, and oh my gosh, that carburetor is just an amazing thing. Why do they keep it hidden under the hood? Let's rip it out of there and set it on the roof so everybody can see it. Now that's an extreme example, but that kind of thing, in a more subtle way, is done. And once that happens, the car doesn't work very well after you rip out the carburetor. And so all these ancient technologies, they need to be re-enlivened. They need to be adhered to rigorously, just as rigorously as you'd be attentive to the science of how to build a cell phone or how to build a computer. It's got to be done properly, or the thing gets lost, And so even our spiritual growth, yes, it's about heart, but it's also about mind. It's the integration of the left and right brain. It's a physiological integration of the individual, you see? And I'll tell you, I've been teaching for most of my life, and I really think that the best way to spend my energy, if I can say it that way, is to get this enlightened city built, And it's just a matter of money, really. I mean, we know how to do it now, and we learned. I didn't realize, to be honest, how powerful it was, even at the stage it's already at. And we needed to learn. I needed to learn how to manage that. It's one thing to know how to build a violin. It's another thing to know how to artfully play it, And I had a good idea, but there are just a few little things, a few little refinements that made a huge difference, And it's going to take money now to complete the construction. And it's going to take a lot of money. But I think if we just stick with it, somebody out there, somebody maybe even listening to this podcast right now, is going to hear that, and they're going to say, we got the money, let's build this thing. All it takes is one billionaire, and we could do it. And once we do it, once we build it and it transforms our country, it's going to spread, and that's going to be implemented all over the world. There's another principle here that I think is it needs to be mentioned, and that is that there's this little story that they tell in India, at least I heard from my teacher. And it's like if you take a person out of a little hut and you put them in a mansion, they first walk around, oh, this mansion's incredible. I'm so lucky to be living in a mansion. But the time comes when they start to say, I miss my hut. I miss my hut. So that sounds kind of simple, but it's actually speaks to a very deep principle in that our physiologies, our psychologies, everything about us, it resonates at a certain, we could say a certain vibration, if you will, a certain way of life. And it becomes familiar. It becomes what's comfortable. And that even includes how we worship God, or how we live our lives, what we eat. And if the culture is healthy, then those things that we learn are healthy and support life and support the integration of the surface of our life with the depth, and life flourishes. But one thing I've noticed is that I'll give these lectures about the Shastras and about Vedic literature and Vedic knowledge and knowledge of, Chaitanya, the unified field, and how integration with that is a physiological knowledge, blah, 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 all of that. And people hear it and they are just enthralled, and they're just, oh my gosh. They say, I've always known this, and I believe them. Down deep inside, we already know everything because we already are one with everything. But the memory of it starts to fade when our attention is just on the surface. But when we hear it, it's like, oh, eureka, finally, now it makes sense. But then what happens is you go with it for a while, you start to make those adjustments to your life or what have you, but you start to miss your hut, be it whatever diet or be it whatever lifestyle, or, we can even take a look at religion. I live here in the mountains of western North Carolina, and I've had the good fortune of just bumping into at different times. I think I can count at least 5, I think more than that, Baptist ministers. One of them, I just happened to be flying back from San Francisco, and I sat right next to him in an airplane, and he and I just got to talking. And others of them just came here to check out Mount Soma, see what it was. Another guy, I've told this story, it's even in a book I wrote, Angels, Einstein, and You. This guy was laying block to make a little extra money, and he was a Baptist minister. He was laying the block in the basement of my house, and we had a talk. But across the board, the point I want to make is every single one of those Baptist ministers were really deep thinkers and seekers. See, it's way too arrogant, I think, to say, oh, okay, I get religion. I get what Jesus was talking about. No, humility is the flip side of wisdom. And we always go deeper. And once we get onto the profundity of the spiritual nature of life and existence, we thirst for knowledge more and more, you see? And that's what, not just the Baptists, but the Catholics, everybody, Jews, you name it. The underlying impetus behind all of that is we know it deep inside of ourselves. We always knew it was true. Maybe we couldn't articulate it with absolute precision, but it's the driving force behind our life. In many ways, that's what we thirst for. That's what we long for. But we tend to revert back oftentimes to a practice that isn't really in accord with the deeper knowledge, And I think it has to be said, I don't mean to be judgmental, because, we're all reaching for it. But I've noticed a lot that even in kind of like the New Age kind of takes on the Hindu philosophy or religion or whatever you want to call it, and they start to do their own little spin around it, their own little New Age cha-cha around it, and they're little uninformed, I think we could say, about the proper use of mantras or the deeper understanding of Vedic literature. And it's not just the New Age, it's, people in general, we could even say. But it compromises the knowledge. I've had people come here and say, oh, you're so rigorous about doing it this way and doing it that way, but if we just kind of got up and swayed and waved our hands in the air and kind of did the New Age cha-cha a little bit, and I don't mean to sound, well, if we did that, then we'd get a whole bunch of followings, and people want to go, they want to feel emotion. So if we just stirred their emotions and gave them what they wanted, we have a whole bunch of people. And my response to that is, I did not come here for that. I am not doing this for that. I would rather have very few people who really want to bring out the knowledge in its purity and are dedicated to that, than to have a whole bunch of people, I don't know what, howling at the moon. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't mean to sound too critical, because at the same time, I understand that inner longing for divinity that they feel inside of themselves is why they do that, And then we get into this thing about, I miss my hut, and that's the way they were taught to feel their connection with divinity or whatever. And it's hard to let it go. It's hard to move past it. But we must move past it. We have to mature our understanding of spiritual knowledge and refine the nature of our life and our existence. And if we do that, we can pull it all together. We can make this happen. We can bring about that phase transition that we've been talking about. I've been talking about. Echoes of truth, perceived as truth, hold truth at bay. And it's tricky. You take a pebble and you throw it in a pond and you get these little rings. And one ring is adjacent to the next. Now, there's really no significant difference, no difference. But it's an echo of that point value of precision, And so if we go for the echo, if we hear an echo and go after we lose the source of the sound. We lose our connection to it. But, it sounds so exactly the same, Well, it's an echo. You see, it's an echo of truth. Now, I just got a question here. Somebody wrote ancient technology ? There are prescribed approaches that we can implement even on the surface of life. We can call them ceremonies, if you will. But what happens is they correlate with deeper and deeper levels. They resonate with deeper and deeper levels. Even the implementation of the mantras, the words. See, there's a lot to this. Mantras are sounds that emit from, and therefore, even when we say them on the surface, they resonate with that transcendental depth of existence. And there's whole, it's not just the mantras, it's not just the chanting, it's also the layout of the place these ceremonies are done. We talk in the West, I think we hear commonly about like fire ceremonies. In the Vedic literature, they're called havans, and they're very precise technologies. It's not just building a fire and making some offerings. It's even the shape of the havan kun, even the shape of the fire pit is very mathematically precise and determined. Even the structure that it's in, the yagyashala it's called, all the proportions have to be right. It's kind of like if you build a bell and you want to ring the bell, the bell's got to be shaped right, or it doesn't ring, it just goes thunk, And so all of that, all those activities on the surface resonate with the depth and then bring out that value. And it's a highly sophisticated science. It even goes right down to the nature of the physiology of the person performing the ceremony, the technology. And here at Mount Soma, we have this Sri Someshwara temple. What is that? What is the Sri Someshwara temple? It's a whole structure that's built to resonate with that transcendental value. And right now, as I'm sitting here right now, we've got a pundit who's been trained since he was 4 or 5 years old, how to perform those technologies properly. And that's what he's doing right now as I'm sitting here every single day. And so what happens is that value, that energy builds. And all the homes here, everything that's built around it is all laid out in, it's called Vastu. It's geometric shapes, structures, Vastu science. So that everything here resonates with that value of the transcendental wholeness of life, you see? And there's a principle that says that, okay, we've got the one temple, the Shiva temple, you know, but as we build these other temples, and it's all prescribed with tremendous mathematical precision, the walls and everything, each additional structure we build that's part of the enlightened city multiplies the influence by many, many fold. It's an exponential thing. And once this enlightened city is completed, it's going to have an influence that's 2,500 times stronger, 2,500 times stronger than what we have now. And if you were here and living here and seeing the effect that it has, just to imagine 2,500 times stronger, it will transform this country, you know, and it's all science. It's all science, you know. Good. So I'm really appreciating these comments. She said they liked the explanation of Vedic technology. All right. Is there anything else, Scott, Adrian?
No.
Nope, not anything I'm seeing.
I think that pretty much does it. You know, I jotted something down here. I talked about, you know, it's like if this stuff isn't understood, I can understand how you'd look at it. And again, an astral echo, you'd do a grade B sci-fi movie, kind of like something out of Star Trek. And it just would seem so otherworldish, you know? And a lot of the astral echoes that get developed from this fundamental understanding kind of create approaches and mentalities that really are, you know, grade B science fiction movies, you know? And so we really need to hone our understanding and our knowledge and really pursue with rigor the ancient technologies that are there available in the Vedic literature. And that's actually becomes quite elusive, because what we're talking about here in the Vedic literature isn't just superficial language, it's the language of nature. So you could say every word in the Veda reaches out in every direction and encompasses everything. Kind of like Newton said, if you understood but one grain of sand, you'd understand the whole universe. Well, it's like that. Every syllable in the Vedic literature, every word is infinitely integrated and infinitely connected with the totality. And so all that comes together into a wholeness value. And that's what we're dedicated to here. And I'm uncompromising, you know. We're going to build it. We know how to build it. I have dear friends, Vedic architects, in South India that have that knowledge of exactly how to build it properly. And we have pundits from South India that know how to operate it, how to operate these temples precisely. And we have it all. We just need to build it. All right, so I guess that's it. Is there anything else before we sign off? I guess not. I appreciate the people who wrote in. Somebody says, "Can I move there?" You bet you can. Best way to do that would be to go. Where do they go, Adrian and Scott? I guess you go to mountsoma.org, and there's a way you can connect. You can email us and contact us, and we'll give you more information. We'd love to have you come. I mean, the more people, the more powerful it will become. But I'll warn you that I talked about in the past one of the ceremonies we do every day called the Rudra Rocher, and how what that is it's taking that wholeness value and radiating it out so that it purifies the environment. It says in the Vedic literature that we live in Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga means an age of ignorance. It means that the discords, the disharmonies, they exist in the hearts and minds of the people. And I think we hear that and we say, oh yeah, I mean, it's just, I think human nature. We watch the news and what do? We say, oh, you know, what's going on out there is crazy. We don't really stop and think, well, maybe we're human too, you know? So the point is that living here can be challenging because that's overstated, but living here requires some dedication just in your own psyche to stay connected to the commitment to what we're doing, you know? I mean, you could come here and you could not even ever go to the temple and just have your life there. Some people here that pretty much do that, you know, they come around some, but here we must live in harmony. That's, I guess, what I'm having to say, you know? And what that means for every individual is quite different. Some people are extremely involved on a daily basis in helping. And some people, you know, again, don't come around that much at all. But if someone was to come here and be negative, they will get jettisoned out by nature, you know. I hope I said that properly. Adrian?
I think so.
Okay.
You know, it's not you or the people. It's just that's the way things work themselves out. You know, like you said, nature takes care of you know, kind of who's supposed to be there and who's not.
That's right, and it's the same with the planet in general. We can have our preferences, be it Trump or Biden or whatever. But nature, if we just create this harmony, this source of harmony, the depth of existence, all that's going to get worked out. You know, in the meantime, we do our best. You know, watch the news, make your decisions, vote for who you want for, all that's great. But nature organizes best. Nature organizes best. All we're going to do is water the root of life. We're not going to try to unravel the knots or tell the tree which way to bend or any of that. We water the root. That's our purpose. You water the root, the whole tree of life flourishes, and that's it.
Michael, could it also be said it's kind of like when if you've ever gone through a cleanse and you're going through the first, you know, few days of it and you're just like irritated and it's bringing up stuff and you're, you know, getting all the garbage out and you're just like, oh my God, you know, and then what's left after it digs up and, jettisons all that garbage that's been in you.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect, Scotty. We have a word for it. What's that?
I was saying that is perfect.
Yeah, we have a word for it. It's called unstressing, purification.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. When you said about the negativity, I was like, the negativity gets welled up because it's like you're going into the grinder and it's grinding out all that impurity or the, whatever it is that's going on in you.
yeah,
That comes out as negativity or this or that or whatever. So it's not about not being negative. It's about this stuff is going to come up, purify out of you. And,
that's right. That's right. We all know to brush our teeth twice a day or whatever, 3 times, however often you brush your teeth. But we need to learn the technology of how not just to purify our teeth, but the whole physiology, the whole psychology. And it's a technology, Somebody asked, what's that behind me? That's a yantra. And it's it looks like a vamana, like they say. But I think if you go to michaelmons.com and scroll through the podcast, I believe I gave a talk on yantras and what they are. It's a beautiful science. It's a great knowledge. All right, so I guess that's it and maybe we can do that again if people can't find it. You can also, at michaelmamas.net, my blogs are all archived as well. And I think if you typed in there yantra, I think there'd probably be a whole blog all about what yantras are and how they work. Okay, everyone, thanks so much. And until next time, you take care, and we'll be plugging away here and look forward to talking with you again.